Well, thank you very much, and good morning, everyone. My name is Julian Klaus, and I'm here today to give a little bit of insight into BMW's open innovation activities here in Korea. A little bit of background on myself. I'm heading the technology office, which is in charge of the open innovation activities here in Korea. And as such, I'm also in charge of the BMW Startup Garage program here in Korea. In the past, I've worked in both Korea and Germany, and have been living here in Korea since 2013. So why do startups matter for BMW? The answer is fairly simple. Every year, billions of dollars get invested into startups. And those are startups that potentially develop game-changing solutions that make a huge impact also for the BMW group. And a good chunk of this investment goes into startups in Asia, and in particular here in Korea. So we believe that Korea is a hotbed for open innovation for our needs. In BMW, we have several open innovation activities, of course. But today I would like to focus really on what we do with startups. Startups are one major pillar of innovation for us, and we collaborate with them on proof of concept projects for our internal clients to validate solutions and to solve problems that exist in our internal business units in the BMW group. So how do we work with startups? We have two major inputs for the Startup Garage. The first is our own internal BMW innovation strategy. Of course, we have defined strategic fields. We abbreviate them as ACEs: autonomous, connected, electrified, and services. And we know what we need to develop the cars of the future, or the mobility of the future. On the other hand, we have great startups from all over the world that would like to work with BMW, but they don't really know how to find their way into our complex ecosystem. This is why we have founded the BMW Startup Garage program. We call it a venture client unit for startup-enabled innovation. Now, let me stick with that term venture client a little bit, because it's not a very common name. The BMW Startup Garage is not an investment vehicle, and it's not an accelerator. We call it a venture client because we purchase pilot projects from startups to work with our internal COCs without any exclusivity, without any strings attached, without IP transfer, with the goal to, out of this pilot project, develop a long-term partnership between the startup and BMW. For the startups, there's a lot of benefits, really, but I would like to focus on a very few today. I mentioned already that we don't have any exclusivity. At the same time, there is no transfer of IPs from the startup to BMW. So the startups retain their core intellectual property. And also, they don't give us any equity. As I said, we're not an accelerator. However, they gain BMW Group as a premium client, and therefore can, in the next funding rounds, for example, talk to their investors and rightfully claim that they have developed BMW already as a client. So they have a supplier number and everything. And of course, they get to work with us on real-world problems and get to validate their solutions with a major OEM of the world, and I would say the best one. On the other hand, I often get the question, why does BMW do that? If we don't invest in startups, we don't gain anything financially from the growth of startups if they really go through the roof. But this is not what the Startup Garage is about. We, through this program, gain a very early access to innovation that otherwise would be impossible really to achieve. We can validate startup solutions and compare them with established suppliers, tier 1 suppliers, and compare them, of course, all around the world with other startups with a very, very lean process. And those of you who have worked with the corporate, not very proud of it to say it, but the normal purchasing processes are very complicated on BMW's side. So through the Startup Garage, we have established a very simple way for a first, let's call it a handshake program, for this proof of concept. There we go. On the entry side to the Startup Garage, we have hundreds and thousands, literally, of startups worldwide. And we are open for startups of every country. The Startup Garage is a program that's headquartered in Munich, in our headquarter. But as I mentioned earlier, we have this tech office here in Korea. We have tech offices in other locations. And we're open really from startups from everywhere that develop solutions that can contribute anywhere in the BMW group. In general, such a POC program would take about 4 months, but this is not a fixed time frame. It's not a batch program, it's rolling. So whenever there's a startup that has a good solution for a current need inside the department within BMW, then we're ready to start. During this 3 months, we have 4 major modules. I will get to what the details are on the next page. And the goal of this 4-month period really is to transfer the startup solutions into BMW's own products, which are our cars and motorcycles, but also into our services and even into our processes. Now, processes here means literally any business unit's business process. It could be logistics, manufacturing, IT, backend, you name it. Even if you have a very smart HR solution, it could be something for BMW to work with through the BMW Startup Garage. So it's a very, very wide field of things that we're interested in. As I mentioned, there are 4 modules, and they're labeled Build, Network, Learn, and Sell. Build is the most important module, certainly. This means executing the proof of concept project with us. This takes the most time out of the 4-month period. But the others are also very, very relevant for the startups and provide a really, really good benefit for them. Network. BMW is a very, very network-driven company. So internally, you can achieve things better if you know more people all throughout the organization. And from the outside, this network is very difficult to access. But through this program, we give startups the opportunity to not only work with the people on a particular project, but also network throughout the company with other potential partners they might have. And I will have a good example later on. The Learn block really teaches startups of kind of what happens after the POC. As I mentioned, there are certain processes for standard suppliers that need to be taken care of, like purchasing, but also we teach them how our development works, how our manufacturing works, because it may be very different from partners they have already worked with. And last but not least, sell. Sell to BMW, sell to other departments, but also sell to other customers. Again, no exclusivity. So through a collaboration with us, the startups gain a very compelling automotive use case. They have validated a solution and can say BMW has tried and tested it already. Of course, we cannot work with each and every startup. We have some criteria that startups need to fulfill to work with us through the Startup Garage program. First and foremost, and I think that's very obvious, there needs to be a BMW use case. You need to have an idea how your solution can be applied within BMW, or we develop this idea together. That's also a possibility. But there needs to be a way that we can use your product. Then, very important, we cannot really work on an idea stage. We already need to have the startup to have a functional product or prototype. Now, it doesn't need to be ready for serious production. It doesn't need to be fully finalized. We're totally okay with the prototype stage, an early phase stage, hence the term venture client. But there needs to be something that can be tried and tested in a BMW context. We also require the startups to have a full-time team. We don't have a fixed number of team members that there's like a minimum requirement, but usually we would say like 3 to 4 full-time team members should be the minimum. And we also require the startups to already have raised some institutional capital from venture capital partners or by graduating from an accelerator, so that they have already run a little bit or ramped up a little bit their business. And the last point, honestly, that's not a big issue here in Korea in particular. The startups have to be a legal entity. Without being a legal entity, we are not able to issue a purchase order. We are not able to buy something from the startup. So in a nutshell, we're looking for startups with innovative technologies, products, or services that can make a significant contribution to the BMW Group. I mentioned earlier that the Startup Garage program is not just happening here in Korea, but it's headquartered in our headquarter in Munich in Germany. And we have satellites, the so-called technology offices around the world that contribute to an overall global network. Besides the office here in Seoul, we have one in Tokyo, one in Shanghai, we have one in Tel Aviv, and we have one in Mountain View in California in the US. And this picture kind of looks very centralized, but of course there's a lot of networking in between the tech offices as well. Now, very often I get asked, like, who do you work with? In particular, there's our friendly competitor, Mercedes-Benz over here. They show a lot of startups on their booth. And we don't do that. Now, we don't do that for a reason. The reason is, again, the non-exclusivity of the collaboration we have with the startups. What we gain is early access. And we validate the startups in the very early phase. Now, we don't want to share this knowledge that we have gained, our use cases, with the world. So in most cases, we do not talk about the startups that we collaborate with. There are a few exceptions today. Though, and today I would like to share one particular startup success story with you to give you an insight of how the process can look of working through the BMW Startup Garage with us. Seoul Robotics is a Korean startup that I guess some of you may know, hopefully many of you know, because they're a great startup, and they work on LiDAR perception software. Originally introduced to the BMW Startup Garage were they in February 2019. And a few months later, we organized a demo session of Seoul Robotics product to not one, but several BMW departments in Germany. Now, Seoul Robotics, as I mentioned, LiDAR software, they were planning to work with BMW for autonomous driving, naturally. But there were other departments within BMW that were very, very interested in their software as well. Use cases that Seoul Robotics at this point hadn't really thought of. And in particular, the one that had the strongest pull internally was our manufacturing department for an internal logistics use case. Can't go into detail right now, but it's very far off from your expectation of autonomous driving inside the car, really. It's still autonomous driving in a way. So late 2019, in December, we started a proof of concept project, first here in Korea, and then we continued that in our plants in Germany. It took about 3 months in total. And then, you know what happened? We had the COVID crisis, so things were delayed a little bit. Hopefully, in normal cases, it wouldn't take that long. But after a very successful proof of concept, a very, very convincing use case, BMW decided to place a major follow-up purchase order with Seoul Robotics and another startup together, Embotech from Switzerland. And they outbid some major tier 1 suppliers, names that you would definitely have heard before. So that's a very huge thing. And through this success story, we were together able to then again convince the Korean government, Kiat and Kotra, to grant Seoul Robotics 3 billion Korean won, about $2.7 million US, over a period of 3 years for this particular collaborative project with BMW. And as far as I'm informed, Seoul Robotics has now discovered this market for themselves and hopes to roll out this or similar solution for other clients as well. So, if you would also like to have this kind of success story with BMW, and you would like to reach out to us, then please come visit us at our booth right over there, straight through here in Hall A, or, and that's the easiest way, just sign up on our website, www.bmwstartupgarage.com. You can upload your information, IR, basic IR information really. It's just an online form. And we will reach out to you when we see a use case. We will reach out to you when we want to know more about your startup. And hopefully in the future, we can collaborate together here in Korea or in any other place of the world to develop the next big thing for BMW. Thank you very much. And if you have any questions, feel free to ask them now. Or again, please come to our booth. I'll be there all day. So you can reach out to me personally at any time, or one of my lovely colleagues.